And we should say hello and happy World Tourism Day today. It's the 27th of September, and this is the Bournemouth University celebration of the World Tourism Day. My name is Dimitrios Buhalis, and I will be kind of coordinating this with my good colleague Derek and what they say? I said Derek. My good colleague Duncan Light, and also we're joined with Vicky Karatzavelou from TravelDailyNews, who will be acting as the commentator. We've got a fantastic panel for you of great people and great friends who will be joining us in discussing what's happening in tourism and how we can celebrate together and how we can go to the next stage of the next stage where COVID will not going to impact us so much, and we're going to be able to engage in different conversations. Now, we have several colleagues who were very happy to be with us, but they haven't managed for a whole range of reasons. One of them is Minister Bartlett from Jamaica. Minister Bartlett is not only a good friend of Bournemouth University and myself, but he's one of the leaders in the world that they're driving the resilience, and he's working very closely with the World Tourism Organization and a whole range of other organizations to actually help us to develop the tourism industry back and reignite tourism in the future. He sent us a very nice video, and hopefully I'll be able to play it for you to say happy World Tourism Day. Let me see if I can play it from here.
Good day, good morning, good evening, depending on where in the world you are. It is my pleasure to participate in this important Bournemouth University World Tourism Day celebration tourism recovery panel, focusing on restarting the global tourism industry and the challenges of COVID-19. Before I deliver my remarks, I must first thank Professor Dimitrios Buhalis for his invitation to offer some thoughts at this important event. In my capacity as chairman of the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center, which is located at the University of the West Indies here in Kingston, Jamaica. Global tourism is now at a crossroads in its cycle. The current coronavirus pandemic has perhaps been the single most catastrophic event to have faced the industry since the Great Depression of 1929. With no clear timeline for the successful development and widespread commercialization of a vaccine, the economic impact of the global public health crisis on the tourism industry is likely to remain pronounced over an indefinite period. The World Economic Forum projects that the end-of-year cost of the pandemic will be anywhere between 8.1 and 15.8 trillion US dollars globally. The outlook for the global travel and tourism industry is especially bleak, with international tourism projected to hemorrhage at least 1.2 trillion US or 1.5% of the global gross domestic product by year-end. Is especially bleak. International tourist arrivals are expected to decline between 20 to 30%. The tourism sector also faces a staggering 100 million job losses due to the corona pandemic, according to the World Travel and Tourism Council. The destabilizing impact of the corona pandemic reflects a characteristic feature of tourism development over the past several decades. Despite being one of the most resilient and expansionary segment of the global economy, tourism is simultaneously one of the most vulnerable to shocks. The susceptibility of the industry to shocks has intensified in recent years. Indeed, the magnitude and simultaneity of the range of dynamic threats facing global tourism is unprecedented. These threats range from those that are generally defined to some geographic regions, but have broader economic implications for global tourism and travel, such as political instability, changing foreign policies, isolationism, terrorism, civil wars, and conflicts, to ubiquitous threats with more immediate and direct cross-border impacts, such as epidemics and pandemics, cybercrimes, and climate change. These threats are associated with the negative consequences for global tourism, including reduced destination attractiveness and security, damage to tourism assets and attractions, water shortages, biodiversity loss, displacement of human populations, loss of human capital, capital flight, and loss of jobs and incomes. As global tourism seeks to rebound from the current crisis and anticipates equally disruptive forces in the future, the single most important challenge of the industry will be to respond to the questions of its adaptability and sustainability. More so now than ever before, the adaptive tourism sector will be required to make and take account of its current and future economic, social, political, and environmental impacts, addressing the needs of visitors, the industry, the environment, and host communities, while fortifying its own capacity for risk management and resilience. Sustainable tourism development cannot, however, be pursued in isolation from other development objectives at the national, regional, or international levels. As the United Nations World Tourism Organization, UNWTO, has noted, sustainable tourism development requires the informed participation of all relevant stakeholders, as well as strong political leadership to ensure wide participation and consensus building. There must be a shared understanding that a prosperous and thriving tourism industry is indispensable to the economic livelihood of millions and the social, economic, and political stability of many countries. This is against the background that tourism is the largest industry in the world. This is also against the background that tourism is also one of the most important catalysts of macroeconomic stability and sustainable development globally. For example, the travel and tourism sector experienced a 3.5% growth in 2019, outpacing the global economic growth of 2.5% for the 9th consecutive year. Over the past 5 years, 1 in 4 new jobs were created by the sector, making tourism and travel the best partner for governments to generate employment. In 2019, travel and tourism also contributed some 8.9 trillion to the world's GDP, or 10.3% of GDP, providing 330 million jobs, or 1 in 10 of every job around the world, and providing US dollar 1.7 trillion in visitor exports, or 28.3% of the global services exports. And of course, US dollar 948 billion in capital investment, or 4.3% of total investment. As a global instrument of sustainable development, the tourism industry must be positioned then as a catalyst of accelerated human development, social and economic inclusiveness, increased entrepreneurship and self-employment, and a generator of decent work. The UNWTO recognized 2017 as a year of sustainable tourism and used the opportunity to focus on key issues of sustainability, such as inclusive and sustainable economic growth, social inclusiveness, employment and poverty reduction, resource efficiency, environmental protection and climate change, cultural values, diversity and heritage, and mutual understanding, peace and security. Tourism is aligned with many of the key targets of the Sustainable Development Goals. And tourism is a labor-intensive sector that creates jobs for people of all ages and skill levels, not only in this sector, but through its value chain in many other sectors, such as the cultural industries, agriculture, construction, manufacturing, transportation, handicrafts, health, financial services, or information and communication technologies. Tourism also has the power to accelerate community development and reduce inequalities if it engages local populations and all key stakeholders in its development. It can contribute to urban renewal and rural development and reduce regional imbalances by giving communities the opportunity to prosper in their place of origin. In spite of the current situation, however, there is a unique opportunity at hand for global tourism. The COVID-19 crisis is a watershed moment to ensure the alignment of post-COVID tourism policies to the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. The crisis has given us the perfect opportunity to select a new direction and move forward by adopting a more sustainable path. Specifically, COVID-19 offers public, private, and academic actors a unique opportunity to design and consolidate the transition towards a greener and more balanced tourism. As it currently stands, in addition to immediate measures to support the tourism sector, countries have also been shifting to develop recovery measures. These include considerations of lifting travel restrictions, restoring travelers' confidence, and rethinking the tourism sector for the future. I welcome global efforts by many world leaders to mitigate the economic and social impact of the pandemic and committing to work together to provide support to a sustainable and inclusive recovery of the tourism sector. As the entire tourism sector needs to adapt to new realities of tourism and the circumstances imposed by COVID-19 pandemic, it is clear that a joint whole of society approach is required. So in concluding, the most important goal for all of us should be to ensure that the industry restarts in a strategic, sustainable, and coordinated way to protect those who are most vulnerable and to prevent any long-term deterioration of the progress achieved over the past decades. Thank you.
Would like to thank very much the Minister for his wise words. And obviously, it's a pandemic. It's a very complicated kind of situation. And we find very, very difficult to deal with that on a global scale. And many destinations, and those particular destinations that they require air transportation, and the islands in particular, are finding a lot of challenges in dealing with this situation. And the Minister has been doing a fantastic job and in managing this situation for Jamaica and helping all the Caribbean regions to manage this situation. We very much thank him. He apologized he couldn't be with us, but he was more than happy to share his wisdom with us. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a great program. We've got several people who are still trying to connect. It's one of these things which are lives, and we've got some issues. I forgot to say in the beginning to invite Duncan and to invite Vicky to say hello and welcome to people. So, Duncan, would you like to say hello and welcome to people?
Hello and welcome to people. I'd just like to say a big hello to any of our past or present undergraduate or postgraduate students who are watching, and you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us, and happy World Tourism Day to you all.
Fantastic. Vicky, would you like to say welcome?
Yes, hello everybody. We heard the Minister of Jamaica, the Tourism Minister of Jamaica, and his words. He was very, very optimistic. And let's see and let's discuss his ideas.
Wonderful. Okay, I think we're gonna see some of our other speakers as well, and then we'll have the opportunity to discuss with many different colleagues. Steve has been trying to connect, but he hasn't so far. So I'd like to invite Luca to present his statistics, because and the structure we've got is that Luca and Steve are going to show us some of the statistics on how COVID is going, and then we're going to have a conversation with some of the other colleagues. Luca?
Hi, everyone. Happy Tourism Day to everyone. I'm Luca from Romozzi, from SOJERN. At the moment, obviously, talking about technology, I would love to share also some trends showing from my slides.
Let me see how I can allow you, Luca, to do that, because it's something you haven't. I'll make you co-host, and in which case you're going to be able to show your screen.
Yeah, that's. Let me see. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's coming.
Perfect. So I hope all of you can see my screen. As I said, happy World Tourism Day. It's a big honor. I mean, I know that we always say whenever we are invited, but this time it's quite a huge opportunity. It's not only the World Tourism Day, it's 2020, it's the Bournemouth University, it's Professor Buhalis. So I'm really, really honored to be here with all of you. So first of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Luca Romozzi. I'm the Senior Commercial Director for SOJERN. Why SOJERN is called for its data? So what we do, we use real-time data to move travelers from dreaming to your destination. So this data for us allow us to have access to 350 million users every month. And so we use this knowledge to help 10,000 of our customers every year. Those customers are hotels that they want more bookings for their hotel, for their website, attractions, destination that want more tourists, and so on. Today, we want to use this data to show you trends. So we aggregate this data globally from all our hundreds of partners, so from their website, what people are doing on their website, and we want to show you some of the insights. So I'll start with this slide that I hope is not surprising everyone. I mean, everyone that at least spend one trip during the summer, you can see that obviously the lodging part, the hotels part, is recovering more than air. So you can see that we put January as a zero base. And you can see the trends, unfortunately, decline up to minus 90% during, let's say, the crisis. And you can see the two trends going up faster from lodging, so the left side, and a little bit slower on the air. So this is something, again, we're looking at bookings for those two verticals. Now, let's deep dive into the flights, okay? And what I did here, I split the data that you saw before into the different regions. And also, instead of starting at the beginning of the year, the index, so the first point that you can see there on the left, is basically the end of May. So I would say, so we can have a proper look to the summer, but especially considering that in June, most of the countries, they would have less restrictions on their quarantine. So you can see that obviously APAC is the first one to pick it up, and then EMEA, so the region. And so this is very in line on how the quarantine was developing. You can see that LATAM at the end is growing really fast. This is because at the opposite, they actually had an impact later on compared to the other regions. So on flights, we saw in EMEA, for example, UK, Greece, Italy were actually leading the growth at the beginning of the summer. We are seeing actually decline right now on the latter part of the summer for those regions, and we see UAE, Egypt, Turkey that are actually growing. So there is a mix on flight booking destinations. Then same exercise. Now from flights booking, we go to the lodging booking, so hotels booking. And here you can see that again, the LATAM effect of later quarantine obviously has an impact. So it goes faster. However, because obviously in LATAM we had a later opening versus other regions. In the US, so US and Canada is outpacing US. And EMEA regions, we did see a consistent growth during the summer. And now you can see a little bit on the last weeks, a little decline also in these regions. But you can see that obviously comparing to just after the quarantine, everyone is definitely up compared to what we were before, showing anyway the resiliency of people wanting to travel in any way. So people want to travel, yes. How do they travel? Well, a little bit different. So for example, here you can see the lodging booking compared by domestic, so within your country, regional, within your macro area, EMEA or Asia or North America, or international. And you can see that clearly everywhere domestic is on top. On the right side, instead, I put a very interesting data that is about the travel intent, so the search for drive markets. Drive markets, we basically consider anything that between the origin where has been made the search to the destination is less than 500 miles. Okay, so we only took the share of those search. You can see in the EMEA, in APAC, this proximity, we can call it, it's definitely trending really positive, up to 70, 80% of the total search for an hotel within the 500 miles. So these are very important insights to take into consideration when you combine those two graphs. Let's not talk only about air and hotels. We do have data on car rental and vacation rentals. And you can see that car and vacation rentals, they recover way quicker than the other segment. So they were the two that immediately the travelers picked up for as an interest to use for their holidays. Then is not here the data yet because we don't have actually this data, but thanks to our conversation with partners, we definitely are seeing a huge popularity on RV rentals, so the motorhome, the camping, but even boat rentals. They were hugely popular during the summer. Obviously, due to their seasonality, now it's declining a little bit like the car rental is doing. The last two slides are focusing on two things that I definitely suggest everyone to take into consideration when on their day-by-day job. One, mobile. Mobile was growing before COVID, but mobile doesn't have a seasonality. Mobile usage is pretty much across all the year. However, what we see that actually this usage is growing fast. And so there are many reasons here. One reason can be the lead time that we see on the next slide. One reason is that we are used to now to do more operations on mobile. Think about your grocery shopping, and also internet speed has play a role here. Thinking about your home internet speed versus your work when you used to be at the office, obviously most of the time can be different and slower at home. And our 5G, our mobile is actually faster. So people might be just easier to have a mobile experience. So think about the mobile. That is definitely one trend that COVID is accelerating. Was there, but is accelerating. Another trend that COVID definitely had an impact is the lead time. So here you have two graphs. On the top, you have the lead time across the year from January to September. You can see below. In 2019, look how our calm world we used to be. You know, like it was very predictable on what the lead time, the global lead time, obviously was across the month. Well, if you see below, that's what happened on lead time during 2020. You can see the huge bump on the black area. This is an increase of long-term planning when there was the crisis. What happened there? Basically, this is another sign of the resiliency of tourism. In fact, what was happening there, people thought, okay, I can obviously travel now, but let me plan in advance as much as possible, because this thing might finish after 4 or 5 months or 6 months. And this is why we see this bump pretty much every single market. Then during the summer, you can see how this longer planning is actually going down to the minimal, way less than last year. And what is growing is the yellow bit. So the last minute, okay? So a booking between one or 2 weeks is obviously the most popular way to book our lodging, our hotels. So the consideration here is obviously traveler type. We changed. You know, there are many different traveler type across the different regions. And this is also due to the being comfortable to actually travel or not, to better wait or better plan. The travel is a little bit more complex. We need to wait on understanding if we can travel to a destination or not. And then we also have flexible schedules. I mean, think about the remote working. Now that I work from home, if my company allows me to travel to another destination and work from there midweek, and I see there is a deal, probably I will take my laptop and go to another destination. So this is, again, a way that COVID impacted the way that we see us working on schedule. The result, as you can see, is obviously quite clear. Now we're living in a very last minute, almost last second industry, but that doesn't mean that the long term will pop up like it did during the crisis. So I hope I was on time. Dimitris told me, oh, I didn't check myself, but Dimitris told me 8
You were fine. Thank you.
So for any questions, obviously I'm here. There is a link that you can check by yourself our insights on our website. But yeah, so have a great discussion. I'm here for any questions.
Thank you, Luca. If you can stop sharing your screen, that'll be good. And then we'll come back into that. Thank you very much. I think what we've seen is the roller coaster. I call it the roller coaster view. And it has been up and down, depending on all the epidemiological developments and how everything was happening. People were trying to identify what they can do and move very quickly. And I think a lot of people, including in industry, they had a really difficult time. I'm going to go to Lee because he's in Malaysia and it's midnight in Malaysia. And he can also give us the Asia perspective, what is happening in Malaysia, what's happening in China, and what's happening in different areas there. And then I'll ask Clare to bring us how she experienced that from the travel agency point of view and the consumer who are calling her day and night, trying to make sense out of what's happening. So thank you very much, Luca. Steve is still trying to log in. If he manages, we'll see what we're going to do. But Lee, would you like to tell us what's happening in Asia and how people are moving into the new situation and the new realities in Asia?
Unmute. Mr. Lee, I think you are on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are. Dimitrios has given me two questions, and how do I see the Asian market recovering? I don't have a crystal ball here, but the situation doesn't seem to be bright in the sense that we have daily new infections in Asian countries ranging from single digit, 0, for example, like in Brunei, to 4-digit figures like in Tunisia and Philippines. The rest of the country is having 3-digit, 2 digits. Like for example, in Malaysia, we used to have 2 weeks ago was 1 digit. Today was 3 digits. So it seems that there's an uptick in many countries, including in Asia. So there is a great concern in that sense. Now, while there are many countries managing better, there are others which are struggling. The statistical dashboard of some countries looks like a roller coaster with this uptick, and the next few days it may go down and up again and so forth. And this actually dampen business sentiments. We actually do not know what to do next, but except to wait. The problem here is that if there is going to be an apparent second wave, then reinstating mobility controls and lockdowns may happen in the next few weeks, especially in Malaysia. So as Malaysia, we had a state election recently, and there are some events that could not be avoided, just like elections, and that contributed to these hundreds of infections because the index case was found to be from these states, and when they came back to the peninsula, the other parts of the countries, and they were spreading it to other states. Now, the situation on the ground is very, very fluid. It is on a day-to-day monitoring, whereas our medical scientists and data scientists are trying to get a grip on the infections trajectory and timelines. It is a very, very tedious and slow process in getting the timelines. And the worst thing is that we don't have an idea, and it is hitting very, very hard on tourism stakeholders. This is a waiting game, and it is a do or die for many stakeholders. The question is, how long can businesses sustain without sufficient flow of revenue? Like, for example, in Malaysia, the government has given a moratorium on loan repayments, and that ends at the end of this month. Then from next month onwards, tour operators, hotels who have taken loans, they will have to make repayments for vehicles or whatever they are leasing and so forth, or without any revenue except for from the domestic travel. The thing is that domestic travel, the revenue from domestic travel is not able to offset the loss from inbound. Some countries like us in Malaysia, which we are ranked about 17 in terms of international arrivals in the world, and countries like Thailand, which is in the top 5 in the world, we depend very much on inbound. So the domestic tourism is merely to mitigate some of the financial losses by these tourism stakeholders. So we are still very, very much deep in the hole. So there are oceans of uncertainties right now. Of course, although there may be waves of opportunities in the future, but the question is, when is the future? When? Time is a critical factor in addressing this devastating impact of the pandemic. And we all know that we need to suppress the pandemic sooner than the collapse of the international tourism industry as a result of border lockdowns. Now, closing borders may be justified during the pandemic, but tourism investments are not justified. And so this is going to reset the whole entire tourism landscape in the sense of tourism investment. The future here is that we need to think, rethink, and reimagine to recalibrate tourism economics and review hidden risks because it affects the future of the tourism industry. So I'm from the private sector. And right now, when it comes to the tourism, it is not investable in the sense that we do not know, we don't have any metrics to even rely upon. Now, when the virus was discovered, it opened a Pandora box. And even though if we have vaccines in the next few months, it's unlikely to be the end game for this pandemic. This Pandora box, when opened, when the virus was discovered, then another Pandora box was opened when there was a border lockdown. It created a whole entire set of economic problems. That is not a health-related issue. So, but the problem here in Asia here, we have even a much bigger problem in the sense that there could be another Pandora box around the corner. Now think of the geopolitical issues that we have in the South China Seas. Think of the US-China trade agreements, these agreements, and the lack of multilateralism in addressing this pandemic. Now we're at a storm now, and before we know it, there could be also another even much bigger one that could affect Asia. And that is the climate change, which can potentially destroy destinations, diminish tourism, as well as jeopardize food safety. And how do I see the Asian market recovering? I would say let's not look at markets at this moment, at least until the first quarter of 2021, but at rebuilding tourism for destinations and upskilling human resources so that we could look forward towards a more resilient and responsible tourism industry. I will thank you very much, Dimitrios. Did I pass my time?
Thank you, Lee. Thank you very much. Vicky was asking me about bringing some questions, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to take Clare as well, because then Luca, Lee, and Clare are more from the travel industry, and then we're going to have the hospitality industry as a cluster just after that. So, Lee, what you're telling us is familiar in the sense. I hope that you had a little bit more optimistic views coming from Asia, but it seems we are all in the same boat.
We are all in the same storm.
On the same storm. Clare, how do you see the storm, and what are your customers asking you, and where do you see things happening? You need to unmute yourself, Clare.
Sorry about that, thank you. So yes, I'm a travel agent, I'm self-employed, one-man band, so I've kind of had to really bear the brunt of all my clients' questions, rebooks, chasing refunds. So I started my business 3 years ago and it's been highly successful. So 6 months prior to COVID, I was making lots of beautiful bookings for clients. So I spent that 6 months doing that. And then this last 6 months, I've spent all the time cancelling, rebooking, refunding. So I've spent I've basically worked for a whole year and I have no money to show for it. I'm in fact in debt from it because if a client pays by credit card, it's the merchant who then pays the credit card fees. So it's pretty dire from my perspective. I do have lots of clients who have rebooked, so exactly the same holiday, but they've chosen to travel next year instead. So I will have retained bookings and clients. However, obviously I won't get paid anything for all of that work until next year. Where I'm a one-man band, it's only actually my time that I'm spending. So for bigger companies who have lots of employees, I think whilst we have the furlough scheme, we're under a bit of a false pretense. I don't think we're going to understand the nature of the beast until the furlough schemes finish. And I think then we're going to lose a lot of airlines, travel agencies, tour operators. And yeah, I'd love to know if anyone has a solution.
We're trying. Okay, so Claire, so your customers were spending a lot of money. They were booking. 2020 was looking fantastic, and then it went the other way around, right? But they're still preparing to go. They're still very keen to travel, correct?
Yes, yeah, the majority of my clients have actually rebooked for next year. And those that have had refunds have said that they're temporarily taking the refund. And then when things are a bit clearer as to when it will be suitable to travel, they're going to come back to me and book with me. So all is not lost. It's just all is postponed, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Let's bring Duncan and Vicky to ask questions. Vicky, would you like to ask your questions to Luca, to Lee, or to Claire?
Yes. I would like first to say that we started with a very optimistic way from the Minister of Jamaica for actually long-term issues like the sustainability and the adaptability of technology. But now we saw with Luca the everyday issues. There are many everyday issues. I'd like to ask Luca, you said some trends like the domestic tourism that you see an increase, and in mobile technology and use of the mobiles. And I would like to ask you if you have data from the negative things, from trends that they will change in negative way, like the cruise, what is happening with the cruising, what is happening with all-inclusive tourism, if we have some data for these sectors.
Yeah, so talking about SOJERN data specifically, I don't have right now with me the cruise data. We do have a good overview on the US market. And obviously what we see overall that is anyway right now a little bit stuck, let's say, on the intention to book. But definitely we do see signals for searches about cruise. So this is pretty much everywhere, you know, like going back to what Claire was saying, people are not only scared only to travel. I think the majority would definitely are looking to travel, but most of them are probably waiting. So right now, I cannot comment directly on the cruise because I don't have the data with me, but definitely is something that we can look and share for the future. Regarding the data that you saw, lodging and flights are all scheduled or bookable online. So definitely the all-inclusive is not necessarily all there. There is no charter, there is no offline bookings on what I shared. So I don't have access to this type of a holiday. What I can tell you is, if you think about flexibility, I think if you are flexible to sell even a package, so for example, the customer can cancel or can reschedule probably before 1 week before leaving. That's the type of features that the tourists are looking right now. So, but those data are not including any full, let's say, all-inclusive or cruise data.
May I ask to Claire, if what kind of products do you sell, and if you see your clients to prefer to travel domestic, because you mentioned about the refund, of course, it's a problem, the refund, but some customers choose to continue their holidays or to just postpone their holidays and do it in the near future. So do you have any specific products that you sell?
The majority of I have access to sell anything that my client likes. However, I sell mainly long haul travel or luxury travel. So predominantly my clients are looking for long haul or luxury, or something's quite niche like river cruising. I don't really sell much domestic UK travel because the margins in travel are very low. It previously hasn't really been worth my while selling much domestic in the UK. So and I don't feel like I can add value for my clients. It's more on the long haul itineraries that I can really add value for my clients. So that's always been my market. And then, so yes, I believe the UK market's been very strong. The staycation has been incredibly successful this year, but that's not something that I look after.
I can tell you, Vicky, that Bournemouth had a fantastic year. They've never seen anything like that. And most of the hoteliers, actually, what's a little secret is that a lot of the hoteliers, they were hoping that they'll have cancellations because they could sell the rooms double the price that they were selling them before. And it was very, very interesting.
As I'm a Greek, no comments to that.
Well,
you cannot compare the beaches of Bournemouth and UK with the Greek sun. I'm sorry, guys.
I know, but I had to swim on 18 degrees beach rather than the 32, and that's something you've got. Okay, Duncan, do you have any questions from Facebook or anything that you'd like to comment so far? Or should we go to Tony?
A few questions on Facebook. So there's one here from Yahoo for Clare. And he asks, if your clients are still keen to travel, how do you deal with them about choosing the dates of next year's travel?
What a lot of them have chosen to do is do the exact same trip, same dates next year. So it's been kind of just shifting it a year exactly. Tour operators have been very flexible with clients in that respect. And for fixed group tours, escorted tours, things like that, the tour operators had identified that people probably would just want to shift a year. So largely that's what my clients have done.
Okay, thanks. Hope that answers that question. And there's another one from the same questioner for Mr. Lee, asking why you felt that tourism investment is not justified.
Well, as an investor myself, in the tourism industry, we really rely on data and reliable data in that sense. So at this moment, when data is actually out of the window, we don't have anything to depend on when it comes to investment. So it is off the chart for us. So in that sense, we've got no data. No reliable data, and everything is out of the window.
Yeah, and I think the questioner agrees with you there, because he says the question, when is the future, which you mentioned is key, and without knowing that, it's very hard to make any forward planning.
Yes.
That's what the questioner says. So that's all from Facebook at the moment.
Thank you. I think that gives us a fantastic bridge to go to the next group of our panelists, and our good friend Tony Matharu, who is an investor, and he's currently investing on a whole range of things in London with his new hotel chain, the Blue Orchids, and also his other interests. But also, Tony, I respect Tony enormously because of the amount of charity work that he does and what he has done in London and in many other places, but in London during COVID to support all the health workers. Tony, welcome. Would you like to tell us how you experience COVID in your businesses and also how you see London coping with all this?
It's been, thank you, and happy World Tourism Day to everybody. It's a challenging time. I think that's can be agreed universally in London, in the hotels, hospitality, travel, air travel, and really every single corner of the globe. This pandemic is the worst impact on our industry, particularly locally in London and the hospitality and the hotel sector that I've experienced. And many people say that it's going to be worse than anything that other people have experienced in the last couple of generations, other than a war. So, and thank you for your kind words about what I've done in the face of a crisis. But I think we can look at crises as the same everywhere. Where if it's a tsunami, if it's a flood, if it's an earthquake, if it's an ash cloud, there's a crisis. If there's a war, if there's a terrorist act, then some people tend to hibernate and hunker down, and some people tend to react to that and try and find solutions to the problems. And that happens everywhere. I've tended to, whenever there's been a crisis, to try to see where there's a need and then to try to satisfy it. In my case, it was healthcare workers and other people who were stranded, and critical care workers and other key workers who needed some assistance in circumstances where most other hotels and hospitality providers were just locking down. But that, I'm not necessarily typical, but I'm not unusual. There are other people who responded in that way. And in fact, one of the good things to come out of this is that individuals and communities did unite together. So just using that sort of language, that in a crisis, people do different things. And what we really need is a solution, rather like I've just illustrated on an individual and micro local level. We need to do that in the future collaboratively. So what we do know is there's universal uncertainty. Mr. Lee adequately and very eruditely explained how it's difficult to invest when you don't have good data and in circumstances where borders are locked down. So, if we were a doctor looking at London or looking at the hospitality sector or the hotel sector, we may look at it through one lens. But if we were looking at the world and the global economy and what we should be doing as the future, we would look at what the diagnosis is and look at where the risks are and try to respond to them. So the biggest risk, all of us, whether we say it or not, it is the case year after year on WTTC will say the biggest risk to our industry is security, whether it's cruise lines, whether it's airlines, whether it's hotels, whether it's locations, whether it's cities, whether it's resorts, a terrorist attack or insecurity is always the biggest risk to businesses in that area. So safety and confidence is not just an individual and personal level, but it's actually also on a global level, and it's for local governments and central governments. They need to be able to respond to that. 125 million people losing jobs is obviously causes economic insecurity. And that is going to be extremely unhelpful. I agree. Actually, I didn't read the learned minister from Jamaica's views as entirely optimistic. I think that he very, very cleverly identified some risks to the world and to recovery and to sustainable recovery by utilising some language which I would have used. He said that he talked about geography. He talked about political instability. He talked about terrorism. We in London and the UK are facing a Brexit and the uncertainty of that, but certainly an isolationist world does not help us in the same way as hotels closing down and turning their backs and shutting their doors on people when there is a need. He talked about cybercrime. He talked about climate change, and there is the big elephant in the room, because that sustainable recovery can only be done with a view of the global risks and the biggest global risk outside of some of the things that have been hinted at but not yet articulated are there, and water shortages and biodiversity change and so on are part of a shared problem that if we do not face now, we will, and our forebears will face it in the future. And I'll give you an example. And if anybody wants to, they can perhaps contact me afterwards. Professor Dimitris will perhaps give you my email address. But there's an example here, and there's a real life example. So in a world where at Heathrow only 5% of the airlines are flying in terms of passenger numbers, and where there are risks attached to travel that are perceived and real in terms of carrying virus. The last thing one would want to do is to tear down an ancient forest with 2.5 million trees to change the biodiversity, the water table and so on, to build an airport in a location where it's not needed, and then bring man closer to animals and risk, of course, the zoological impact of that, with communities now in forests and areas where viruses and other things can move from one to another. So on the one hand, we can say we want to have people to travel for foreign and distant places, but on the other hand, we've got to be careful about the sustainability of that travel and how we do it. I happily share you a documentary recently that really shocked me into thinking just actually what we shouldn't be one-eyed and look at it through one lens from London or from the UK or even through the prism of Europe. But actually, we're all in it together. And the one thing that is together is this global uncertainty and a sharing is necessary. One of the things that we need to do, and Professor Dimitris referred to it, is what I'm thinking about in the future. And it's clear to me, and Mr. Lee again emphasized the necessity for good data in order to be forecast and to predict behavior, in order to be able to invest. We went with 7 years growth all gone down in less than a year. And he needs data and the technology to analyze it in order to be predictable and to be able to predict growth and where there are opportunities for investment in the future. That's given some of the things like border restrictions being lifted and confidence being restored on a local and international level. And so the way in which we capture our data and we utilize it is going to be critical in the future. And that can mean risks, not just cybercrime risks, but we need to have some informed consent of sharing our data, whether it's our health data or an ID data on a no touch point travel experience where we don't need passports and we don't need to check in the way that we've done in the future. And that is going to expose us to a bit of risk, but it does mean that each of us and our businesses need to manage our data better. And one of the things I'm investing is exactly to do that, in order to be able to manage our data instead of in lots of different silos, to be able to understand it better and to be more to be able to use it to be more predictable in the future. When somebody says that and never let a good crisis go to waste, I think that we all have a responsibility and a duty to not let it go without some productive and positive outcome. So whilst the minister and Mr. Lee referred to potential risks, geopolitical, strategic risks, if there is an election which is contested in the United States and the outcome is then disputed, the world, can it afford 3 months of US being stuck in uncertainty? Will other people, other players on the global stage take advantage of it? There's activity in the South China Seas. There's the potential risks from Russia. And I go back to my initial point about global risk and security. It's what actually we need to be able to predict and try to restore some confidence in local and government and international government institutions. Because if we all take an isolationist, me, myself, I approach, then we're going to risk lots of things and we won't be able to take over and respond to the global uncertainties which exist, including, but especially global warming and climate change, in order to build a really sustainable future.
Thank you, Tony. Really appreciate that. And it's always fantastic to see how strategic you are. And you are the investor in this panel, and instead of talking about banks and return on investment, you are looking into the future and you are looking at all the strategic issues and how they are all affecting us. Thank you very much for that. I'm keen to bring my friend Dimitris Manikis into the panel, and then we'll have a conversation together with Tony and see hospitality in general. And Dimitris is the president of Wyndham Hotels for the EMEA region, and he's facing several challenges with his hotels and his customers around. And I'd like to see how a large company, international company, is actually dealing with those issues. Dimitris?
Thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, or even good night to some of you. Happy Tourism Day. The only thing I want to start with is that tourism will survive. No matter what happens, we celebrate Tourism Day, and I think tourism will survive. We're not going to go, 5,000 years behind, and we're going to live in caves. People will travel. Things might change, and people might change the way they travel, but they will travel. And I really, I've been with Tony on a number of events, and you're right. He's a strategic thinker. He's got some great ideas of what he's going to do with data. And I had the pleasure of attending a couple of sessions that he was talking about the use of data in tourism. But as far as we're concerned, for us, it was, especially in the beginning when we were all served this amazing curveball and the black swan, it was about survival. We realized soon enough that this is probably the worst crisis that the hospital industry has ever faced. So for us, it was, as a business, as a global business with 9,300 hotels in 90 countries, it was about survival. And I do appreciate what Clare was talking about in her own, kind of one man on one woman job and trying to survive. Actually, it wasn't very different with 9,300 hotels around the world, Clare. We all realized how bad this was, and we all tried to do two things: A, survive, and then mind people. Mind our people, mind our teams, our customers, mind our franchisees. As far as Wyndham is concerned, we've got 20 brands. We are predominantly a franchise business. So for us, it was the survival of our teams. It was the health and safety of our teams, and it was the health and safety, not just from a hygiene and kind of a health perspective, but the financial health of our franchisees. We've taken some really hard decisions, unfortunately, for our people. It was part of our survival plan. We actually stood by our franchisees because that's what you do. This is the time that, and I fully agree with Mr. Lee, at the time of a storm, your crew and your captain is going to be tested. And if you don't have the right crew and if you don't have the right captain, then you are in a real dire strait. So we made sure we had the right people on board. We made sure that we established trust and confidence in our leadership. We made sure that we stood by our franchisees, and we took some really tough financial decisions for a company, but always minding how we can help them survive. Because no matter what happens in politics, no matter what happens with sustainability or not, if you don't have business, then your own business won't survive. So that was, for us, the number one priority: trust, confidence, our team members, our franchisees, and standing by all these people that they were building plans for what happens the next day. This is not going to be a sprint. This is going to be a marathon. I wish, we like to say in Greece that we invented Oracle, but actually she never told anybody really what is going to happen. And again, Mr. Lee is right. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what is going to happen. But what we do know is that we shouldn't allow the lessons we learn to go wasted, either on a personal level, on a corporate level, on a micro level, and on an industry level. If we go back being what we were 6 months ago, I think there's going to be a fundamental shift and a change in behavior that we didn't realize and we didn't recognize. So you never allow a crisis to go wasted. You're right, Tony, but at the same time, you never allow for the lessons you learned to go wasted as well. So from a Wyndham perspective, how we see the future, yes, there's going to be uncertainty. There will always were. There are going to be a lot of curveballs that we don't know where they're going to come from. But if you build the right infrastructure, stop it thinking about what happens in the next 5 years, but actually changing and be agile and addressing the needs of next month or the month after, I think there's going to be a good opportunity for all of us to survive. People are not going to go back to caves. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for investment. I see a lot of investors coming back, even with a lack of data, gentlemen. They're actually saying, you know what? I don't want to park my money in no interest. I really want to invest in the hospitality industry. I really want to see where the future lies. And if I can take some risks now, I do believe that in 2-3 years, I'm going to be paid back. Because no matter what happens, vaccine, no vaccine, or people will still travel. That's what a lot of us are betting on. And we as Wyndham, that's our number one priority. We're not going to go back to caves. We're still going to travel. We might travel differently, but sensing what that different and that new norm is going to be, that is what is going to keep us in business. Will there be consolidation? I guess it will be. Will there be people that are going to make it? Yes, of course. Will there be airlines that we depend on in various locations? Yes, we need them. They might adapt as well. Everybody I speak to, and I promise you, I speak to many, many, many people every single day. They say, we need to realize what is going on. We need to adapt. We need to keep our eyes and ears open. And at the same time, we need to realize that this crisis, no matter how unprecedented it was, there is going to teach us so many things that if we deploy them in our strategies, we're going to survive for the future. That's where we see. You know what? It's going to be tough. Yes, it will be. Will there be people that are going to suffer long term? Yes, there will be. But if we stick by them, if we build the trust and the confidence, and at the same time we do mind our own people and mind our business partners, I think we've got a future for all of us, and especially for tourism. So celebrating Tourism Day, it's not in vain. This is not a funeral. This is actually celebrating what tourism is going to mean for the years to come and the generations to come. We're not going to go back to caves. For sure we won't.
Thank you, Dimitri. That's very wise words, and actually, I think you're right in a way that we will move to the future. And I think if there is anything we've learned during this period is that people really want to travel, and their mental health is suffering, and their well-being is suffering if they do not travel. And I think they cannot wait until they feel safe to travel. I can see Vicky has got questions. So let's have a little panel with our hoteliers, with Tony and Dimitri. Vicky, do you have a question?
Well, yes. Actually, I have a lot of them. So I need to
just
focus.
One, yeah?
Yeah, just one. Okay, so to the hoteliers. Dimitri, hi, Dimitri.
That's Vicky, hi.
Hi. So I think it's really tough for you. Maybe it's the problem is bigger. The bigger the business, the bigger the problem to me. I'm not sure if you agree with that. So do you have any short-term plans about the hotels that you didn't open, and what is going on with all these things with safety, and when do you plan to open more hotels? And I mean, how the recovery way will go in the near future.
So, I mean, again, looking at it from a Wyndham perspective, we believe that conversions are going to be key. There are not going to be a lot of new builds. There are going to be a lot of conversions. So people will change from one brand to another, or independents will follow the brands, because the brands, no matter how people like to criticize us, we do bring, safety. We do bring confidence into the eyes of the consumer. We've done a lot, as other companies, hospitality companies have done, to talk about confidence in people traveling, either being our Count on Us initiative, our health, our hygiene, our collaboration with key hygiene companies to make sure that we keep the guests safe. A lot of our franchisees decided to open their hotels because, in my country, they say, eyes that you don't see, you easily forget. So they decided, no matter if they were just close to break even, to open their hotels, as Tony did, just to be out there in the marketplace. So you will see a lot of hotels opening gradually. During the pandemic, in the eye of the storm, we had 85% of our hotels open globally, because we are, that's what our franchisees, that's what they did, and they said, we need to reopen. And in terms of what we are seeing from a Wyndham perspective, we're seeing a lot of investment interest. in our brands. We see a lot of investment interest in the Mediterranean basin. We see a lot of interest in Spain, Portugal, south of Italy, south of France, Greece and Turkey. We see a lot of interest there. We see the interest increasing in Cyprus. I believe the Mediterranean destinations will suffer temporarily, but they will come back very strongly. And at the same time, we see staycation, exactly as everybody said. The solution for survival in the interim will be staycation and domestic business. And the long term will be, again, going back to traditional destinations where people enjoy to have their holidays. The other interesting trend that we see secondary cities picking up gradually. So you had Paris, you had London, you had all the great destinations, but suddenly you see secondary cities equally following the trend. And that is something that we need to explore and we need to watch very closely, because they were not necessarily in a lot of people's radar. I mean, Tony mentioned it, the UK or England is built, whatever happens to London, and then the rest of England. Now you see a lot of business in Bournemouth. How can Bournemouth keep those customers next year? Because they had a unique opportunity. Look what happened, for example, in Cornwall this year. There was not even one room available. How can Cornwall actually keep those business for next year? These are the kind of dilemmas that we all gonna see. But the reality is that our business changes every day. Our plans change every day. Adaptability and agility is what we do in order to survive. And that's what we do in every single day. Yes, we do have long-term plans, but those can change with a curveball in next month. That's the reality. Either we like it or we don't.
Thank you, Dimitri. Tony, I'd like a couple of things, really. How is London doing? And I know that it's doing a little bit it's a little bit difficult for London. But also, I'll ask you a question, but it's up to you if you like to answer it. How do you deal with the banks? Because you're, out of everybody on the panel, you're the person who is going to the bank and say, look, this is my investment kind of plan and what I'm doing. How is the financial system dealing with this situation?
Okay, so I just, well put, Dimitris, and you're right that we've got to stay optimistic. Entrepreneurs are always looking at what we can do next and how we can resolve a problem. So I kept my hotels open, Vicky, and I did it because I thought that there was a need, and I wanted to keep my people employed. So it was a part of what Dimitris said about keeping your people, the captain not deserting his ship, keeping the crew on board, and everybody realizing that that there is going to be a future when we get through the storm. And I think we got some learnings from that. The health and safety, because we were dealing with critical care nurses and doctors and people who are not operating theatres, we had to set up protocols, and we were ahead of the market. We understood what the needs were, and our safety protocols were the best of any hotel in London, because we were one of the fewest that were open, but we had the most experience when the travelling public were able to return. And we had people like Bureau Veritas who were looking at what we were doing and accrediting us. And in fact, Global Hospitality Services, an organisation I'm associated with, will be rolling that out to anywhere across the world. They can log on to Global Hospitality Services and have a look at some of the risk analysis and assessments that we did. But moving on from that, it wasn't just my hotels that I kept open. I also thought that London needed to keep open, because there was a whole infrastructure and an economic benefit to be attached to all of the wide tapestry of life that goes on in and around London. So I started Here to Help London as a voluntary service to try and respond to those people who are vulnerable and weak, and those people who needed some support. And that has now expanded into something that was launched last week called the Central London Alliance. So this is a long-winded answer to your question about what are we doing in London. So I believe that London has its own a separate economic climate. It has its own tourism climate. It has its own employment climate. And that we need to ally with theatres and galleries and attractions, big businesses and small businesses and transport providers and other colleagues, and collaborate in the same way that I identified that we ought to do it across the globe and with governments and so on. London is suffering. It's suffering very badly. One of the things it's suffering from is political inertia. And so I'm quite happy to articulate that, because this is something that should not happen globally. The kind of things where we've got a mayoral election and a central government that has got sort of opposing views and yet controls some of the purse strings, and the mayor's office controls the public transport system. All of these things, they've got to put away their petty differences and arrive at something that's going to be beneficial for London, for Londoners, for lives and livelihoods, for employment and for businesses and for visitors and so on. That's what's needed. And that's why we have, unfortunately, got what's been called a donut economy, where central London is really on its knees and wanting other people to be cognizant of that. And mixed messaging from government about go to work, don't go to work, travel, don't travel, group of 6, maybe 7, 30 at this place, 6 at that place. All of this is very unhelpful. And so I think we need some coherent, sensible policies and messaging in order to safely restore businesses back to good health. So London needs it, but also London's a gateway city for Bournemouth, for all other cities across the UK, and in fact as a hub to other locations across the world. So a London that suffers causes the UK economy to suffer. And I think that London produces as much GDP as the next 27 cities in the UK combined. And that's the kind of impact. And in terms of employment and gross value added and so on, the numbers are huge. But they're only huge if one looks at it in comparison and in conjunction with other cities that we need to ally with. Because people who fly from the States might want to go to Frankfurt, Paris, London and Rome, and maybe travel elsewhere too. And if you take out 2 of those, maybe they won't travel at all. So this is, as the pandemic is, it's affecting everybody on the earth, and the lack of travel and the borders locked down and inadequate response affects us all. And that's why I think of partnership and a collaborative response. Local government, local politics, central government, global politics, they all have some impact to play on what we do. Coming to banks, actually not dissimilar. Banks are concerned about making sure that their asset values are retained, because they lend as a percentage of your asset value, and they look at your cash flow in order to make sure that you're going to be able to repay those debts. And at the moment, they can't really see what a value is. What is the value of a hotel now? They can't. Your forecasts and predictions that you gave them last year for this year are just out of the ballpark. And so they don't know what to judge on. And I think that was Mr. Lee's point about data. It's very difficult to follow a trend when the trend is so bumpy and unpredictable. As to asset values, I think they are going to be masters of their own destiny. They can do it. I can only really speak for London, but they can do what they did in the early 90s, which was to foreclose on lots of hotels who are breaking their banking covenants. And as they do that, the security of the deeds in their bank vaults starts to diminish, and that causes greater uncertainty, and coupled with in that case rising interest rates, it just leads to the very situation that they would have wanted to avoid, with decelerating value and therefore worse adherence to covenants as their loan to asset values go in the wrong direction. And coupled with a lack of demand, which affects your cash flow, because there's a limit to what you can do on costs, particularly as there's been so much cost cutting already in the pandemic. So it does require bankers to hold their nerves, and it requires institutions to understand that rather as Dimitrios said, there is a future, there will be survival, and the decisions we make as entrepreneurs, as hoteliers, as travel agents and investors are dependent on the nerve of bankers also, who must understand that there may be some structural change, but actually they are part of the change, and they need to be supportive in the same way that Dimitrios said, in a storm, the captain and the crew require support in order to get to more Pacific waters. And so that's what we have demonstrated in the past. when crises have occurred, whether it's been a terrorist bomb that's gone off in London or a Lehman Brothers credit crunch. We've managed to get through it, but it does need the support and collaboration and partnership of everybody, including institutional and other investors and banks.
Thank you, Tony. I think it's wise words, and I think everybody on the panel will agree with that. As time is pressing, I'd like to go over the Atlantic to my friend Bruce, who is waiting patiently, and then to Adele, who is just around the corner from where I am, who are my academic and research partners and friends. And I guess in the meanwhile, while they were listening to all our friends and colleagues from around the world, they were kind of taking notes and they were thinking of things. And both of them are human resource experts. And I guess there's issues about our students who have just joined us and those students who have just graduated and all these people in the industry that they're looking to how are they going to survive the storm and how they'll go to the next stage. So Bruce, what do you see in the US and what do you see in the world from your end?
Well, thank you, and happy World
Tourism
Day and everything else that comes with it. It's a delight to see you all, and I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words about my perspective. As Dimitrios noted, I tend to focus primarily on human capital, and I'm also, I'll throw my bias out there, I'm a glasses half full kind of guy anyway. So I try to, even though I've been fighting a lot of fires and looking at this through a very crisis management lens, I do think that there are several silver linings out there that I've seen from my conversations of chief human resource management officers from around the globe over the last several months. One thing I'll observe is that there still is a fair amount of crisis and pain management that is going on still. And a lot of folks are very mired in the immediacy of that. And to the points that were made earlier, I know a lot of it, especially here in the US, there's a lot of legal compliance that was very administratively time intensive. And a lot of places where you have established legal frameworks, that was a big deal for a lot of folks early on, because as was pointed out, costs are a huge issue. And so labor was one of those things that was looked at very, very seriously, and through the light of what do we do with the folks that we have, and furloughs are no fun, but we have to do it. So the good thing is that a lot of folks that I spoke with are pretty progressively oriented in this, and this is going back to a sustainability idea. And that the employers who responded well to this and knew that they did have to shed a lot of their workforce dollars because they couldn't carry it, were able to do so in a way that I think was reasonably sensitive. And they focused a lot on the well-being and mental health of their employees, those that they furloughed, as well as those that are survivors. And so they put in a lot of time and effort to make sure that team was well taken care of, and that the individuals on the line felt like they had their back. And that, yeah, they knew there were going to be huge demands, and it was going to be tough, and we're all going to be very, challenged by this. There was still, I think, a very, well-orchestrated, concerted effort that I saw in many organizations to ensure that. And that poses a couple of things. One is it ensures that those that are still providing the services to the guests that do travel, most of them are domestic, yes. But it's also to those that, as business does pick up, if the employers that responded well to this are able to pick up those employees much more quickly, and you won't see the defection that I think is likely to see in many other places. Employers who did not manage this furlough or layoff process particularly well, or who were poor communicators or have not supported their employees through this effort, are going to have a hard time picking up folks when the economy does steam forward. So that's one of the things that I think is really important to think about here in terms of how we're branding opportunities in our industry, not just on an employer-to-employer side, but how we're doing it more globally. And I'll say another bias. I think until this point, most of the operational jobs that I see worldwide aren't viewed as very favorable. It's a low-wage, low-skill perception, and we have to change that. And part of it now, I think, is an opportunity for us to do that and look at the structure work, what we ask people to do, because now we've got, job responsibilities that are really blurred. We're asking people to dance a lot of different dances, and we really need to really think about the ways in which we're going to organize that. I've also seen structures flatten very, very quickly. And instead of traditional reporting relationships, we're going to hub and spoke and project types of structures. And that's a much more responsive and an agile form of managing the guest experience and the operational needs that we're seeing. So from that, I think we're seeing some really cool ways to innovate. And not only do you see business models flipping and you see really cool infusions of technology or new concepts, but what comes with that is the renewed view of what that labor you need to do, can do and should do. And I think the blinders are coming off a lot, and we're now looking at professionalizing the work and making sure that we can provide a lot better kind of intellectual as well as emotional experience. And through this, I think we can expect to see additional innovation in response to some of the ways in which we're finding ways to address the changing needs of the guests and the business models that have evolved. So I think the nature of work is really fundamentally, in my line of sight, a real critical concern, especially as we start seeing the economy. And again, I do believe that we're seeing a resurgence in terms of business coming back in some key places. It's coming from the bottom up and local start. But as we see, and again, global participation on all the levels that have been noted have to be there as well. But it will come back, and I'm really hopeful that some of the things that I've seen in terms of these experiments with the new ways that we're going to manage the crises and now the opportunities that come from that in a much more thoughtful and sustainable fashion.
Thank you very much, Bruce. I think you raised a lot of issues, but I think one of the key issues is the fact that those people who look after their crew are going to be able to be with them in the future, and they're going to take their business forward and do a whole range of things. And that's a good link to pass on to Adele to kind of share her thoughts from her experience both in the UK and internationally, and how he sees management changing, and how he sees our students and all the graduates and all the talent going forward.
Thank you very much, Dimitris, and it's a pleasure to be able to celebrate World Tourism Day with you all. Now, this has been so interesting that I've been listening and writing things down, and I kind of almost forgot I got to say something. So I suddenly thought, oh, blimey, what I was going to say has changed several times in what I've been listening to. So thank you very much to all of you for a really inspiring conversation. Now, I'm mindful of time, so I will keep it brief. And I think actually two of the things that I was thinking of saying, Bruce has actually very eloquently said already. I think he's absolutely right that those people who have looked after their employees will benefit from this, very much so going forward. What I would start by saying is, if you'd asked me to talk to you 6 months ago at the beginning of this pandemic, I think we were really concerned around tourism demand. And what we have seen, and several of you have alluded to this, is the demand hasn't gone away. And certainly in the UK, from domestic tourism perspective, as soon as the brakes were off, it went crazy. And we've seen nothing like it before in Dorset this year. And so that's hugely positive, because I think we were originally talking about how we would have to convince consumers and get confidence back for the consumer side. And that just, I think absolutely demand is still there. So that's good news for employers. It's good news for our students as well. But I'll stick with confidence, and I think three things to say. And if I talk about confidence, first, employment perspective, I think it's around having confidence for employees to go back to work, because things have been a lot of changes. Things have been quite different for people. There's a lot of health and safety concerns. They've been dealing with some quite challenging customers, quite challenging situations as people have returned to travelling again. And so I think it's confidence about people who've chosen to make this a living, chosen to have a career in tourism and hospitality, making them feel valued, welcome, looking after them, and training them properly for how we do things in this continuing pandemic. And I absolutely agree with what was said before. We're in this for the long haul. So a confidence for employees. And then actually I was thinking about confidence for entrepreneurs, and Mr. Lee mentioned this very early on. One of the things that I I'm concerned about is that whether this pandemic will put off our fantastic people that have the entrepreneurial ability to take this industry forward. So I'm thinking of Clare here, you know, that one person business. And that's so typical of much of the tourism industry. You know, our family enterprises, small, medium enterprises. I would hate to think that this is knocking the confidence, but Mr. Lee and others have alluded to it, absolutely right. Without the data, with no certainties, how are we going to deal with this? So finally, staying with confidence, and this is from a tourism education perspective. And one of the things that I think we need to think about is the confidence in people still wanting to study this fascinating industry. And I'm thinking of myself and lecturing, and, you know, I'm in a very fortunate position. I teach great people from all over the world on our tourism master's program and our undergraduate program. And I always start off the academic semester with a slide that talks about tourism growth. And it's so fortunate that I've done this for the last 20 years with a few blips in that demand curve, but it's always one of positive growth. And this is the first semester where I've actually got to talk about something significantly different. So what is it that's going to inspire people to continue to study tourism and hospitality? I mean, I think it's worth it in its own right because of the opportunities it gives. But I think as educators, this is something that we will be facing. Now, all of you in your really fascinating talks this evening have talked about the things that are going to be important, and those skills are not going to go away. There's clearly the need for technological skills, business skills, innovation, all of those things remain. And we will need these because this industry absolutely will come back. So for those of you who have studied tourism, who are about to embark on studying tourism, you know, this is a significant change to anything we've seen before. But I think the future is positive. But we have to be realistic, and we have to be honest, and we have to talk about the differences that the pandemic has caused for those of us who are genuinely interested in this as a topic for study. And I'm looking at the clock, and nobody ever minds if you finish early. So I think I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adele. I'm known for keep interesting conversations going and not necessarily looking at the watch. Thank you very much. I think we had fantastic presentations, interventions. Let me start with Duncan. If he had any questions from Facebook or any questions that he wanted to ask himself.
No questions for the last two speakers, at least not yet. I'm just kind of monitoring when people approve of things, and there's been several moments in the evening that have generated particular approval. So firstly, it was Dimitris's claim that tourism will survive. A lot of people like that. And also Bruce's, when he was talking about how good employers will come out of this best, that also generated a lot of interest and approval.
Fantastic. And we know that our students are interested in good employers, and they're looking into different people. And of course, they know that Tony is an excellent employer now, and they know that Dimitris is a very good employer as well. Vicky, do you have any questions?
Well, no, but I wanted to mention that people are very important in our industry because we serve people with people. So I heard from your speakers here that they pay attention to the people, and I believe this is very, very important for our industry, so to survive, as Dimitris said.
I think we should be proud of the tourism industry this year. I think the tourism industry has demonstrated solidarity and has demonstrated a whole range of new initiatives that help society. And I'll say that again, Tony is on the forefront of that, but a lot of other organizations, a lot of other people came forward and they actually did their bit for society. And I think And when I think Bruce was saying something earlier, and what Adele said, that we normally always show growth and everything else. But if you are in agriculture, you know that you had some bad years, and you know that sometimes you've got storms and you've got weather conditions that they destroy all your product. And I think increasingly we need to start looking into that as an opportunity to reflect a little bit, reorganize ourselves, and actually redevelop what we do in a way that is going to take us forward. And I was speaking on another event recently, and I said to a colleague, I said, "Do you think that we are proud of everything that we did before?" And if we reflect a little bit, I think we'll see some practices that we can see how we can do better. And I'm not necessarily jumping in any conclusions that a lot of people are doing, because every single context is quite different. But I think it's an opportunity to actually to go back to our values and look into our values and see how we can perform better in this business and in this economic activity. And we are very privileged in tourism because we are seeing people at their best when they have fun. If you are going to hospitals, you see a lot of people that are in desperate need of help. If you're going to some other areas, it's not. We're in a privileged situation, and I think that will take us forward. And I think it brought home the fact that we need to help society rather than society needs to help us. I'll give to everybody the floor for 1 minute, if you like, to your closing remarks, and then I'll wish you all happy Tourist Day. Who would like to start? Closing remarks. Luca, you were first, so
Yes.
Would you like to say your closing remarks?
Yeah, I also been reflecting on all the talks, and give me lots of inspiration. And the only remarks I want to do is, right now is the moment to focus to who you're making a difference. Like when you're thinking about your clients, your future clients, like make sure that you focus on who is gonna benefit the most of your service, because those ones will definitely be the core of the business. And so that's what I've experienced in SOJERN. Focus on who you're gonna make the most. And talking about HR or the management, what I really loved is the transparency on how we are progressing and how we are fighting through this storm. So transparency and focus.
Thank you, Luca. Lee, I know it must be 2 o'clock in Kuala Lumpur.
Mute.
Lee, you there? It's 2 o'clock.
Okay.
I really appreciate. I really appreciate you. So your final words, please.
Sorry? Yeah, yes.
Your final words.
I was looking through and listening to everybody, and I was thinking about Asia and what's the future for Asia. Not so much of the market, as I mentioned, because we would need to wait for next year. But on the destinations, I understand that Bournemouth University is actually quite well known for visitor economy strategies, as well as for maybe perhaps responsible tourism. These two things, these two areas, which I'm very interested in introduce into particularly South Asia in the developing countries, because right now we need to consolidate on the ground with the local governments and how tourism could actually be managed properly for economic returns. Otherwise, I think we're going to have a lot of problems convincing governments to give allocations for tourism, because there's so many other industries who are going to be vying for government allocations, and tourism is not going to look good at this point. So visitors, I understand visitors economy will also include data analytics and so forth. So that's something that we need in this part of the world. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Claire, when you came here, you thought that you had the biggest problems, but I guess hearing our hoteliers, you realize that you are not alone. We're all on the same storm.
Yes, yeah. Unfortunately, though, because I'm not employed, I haven't been paid for my whole entire year of work. However, I'm still smiling, and I'm just delighted that I was invited to join this panel today. It's been a mix of positivity with reality, and yeah, I agree with what people are saying. Future is bright. Tourism will continue. markets are resilient and people will want to travel. We just have to work out how we can best help them to travel.
Fantastic. I don't know if we said that you are one of our products. You graduated about 10 years ago, right?
Correct. Yes, I am. I was one of your master's students 10 years ago.
And you had fun ever since.
Absolutely. The master's course really gave me the confidence to start my own business. I'd always wanted to start my own business. I'd worked in travel for about 8 years, and then doing the master's really gave me that confidence to go out and take the world by storm.
Fantastic. Tony, your final words and your
Yes, my final words. Well, thank you, Dimitris, for giving us the opportunity and the oxygen and publicity for our thoughts. There are 5 or 6 words, if I can, which some of which have been mentioned, but others not. So values. The values are the core of your business, and they travel with you. Integrity is absolutely essential. The man or woman you see when you brush your teeth in the morning, in the evening, that carries with you forever. And irrespective of what other people may think, you need to demonstrate it. It needs to be witnessed in what you do in your business and the way in which you carry out your life. So, and they endure. They endure through a pandemic. They endure through a crisis. And the way in which you respond at this point in time, the solutions that you come out with are things that people will remember in the future. So the next thing is collaboration and partnership, because we can't do it on our own. None of us operate in a vacuum. And we need to have people who collaborate with us and partner with us, as we are doing right now. And that has to be at a sort of a micro level in your own business. You need people to collaborate and cooperate with you, your suppliers and your supply chain. Equally, you've got to value them and they've got to value you. And so it can happen locally, but actually globally on a world tourism day, we really need to be thinking that we cannot be island mentality, isolationist, and ignore the rest of the world, because we are now, if nothing else, interconnected with everybody else. Every other human being on the planet is now impacted by this pandemic, and there may well be another one. So where there are challenges, there are solutions. And the one thing that we really, really need, all of us are perhaps examples of it in one way or another, is leadership. So we need examples of leaders who are prepared to speak up and take on the challenge and to bring people with us. Because if we all just hibernate, then nothing will get done. And finally, really an answer to Claire, we've all taken risks, some of it to take it personally and some of it use other people's money. But there is nothing in life without a risk. Indeed, whether I go out in a bubble of 6, or whether I wear a mask or not, in every day we do have risks, and the management of those risks is something that we do consciously and subconsciously. And every single day we decide to take actions or not according to our sort of our spectrum of risk. And in some cases, you could say Wyndham hotels with however many hotels, take very big risks, and the smaller sole trader takes a less risk. But actually, in each way, they're all just as important. And I certainly, would have been expecting about £100,000 a day in income that didn't come since the beginning of the year or since March. There are other people I know with who would be expecting revenues of £250,000 a day for their London business, and they've had next to nothing. Closing your businesses doesn't help, and everybody's got something invested in it. So we do need to have good leaders who've got a perspective, and it isn't a selfish perspective. We in the industry know that more than anybody else, because there are multiple partners that are involved, from triggering the consumer booking to consultants like yourself who can advise and consult, to all the supply chain that goes into delivering that service. We're all connected, we're all together, we need to collaborate, and a resilient and sustainable future is upon us, but we need to make it happen, because other people won't make it happen for us.
Thank you very much, Tony, and thank you very much for your leadership in the industry and society. I think we need more leaders that they take us forward. Thanks so much. Dimitris, Manikis, from a global perspective and looking into the world,
Wow, I mean, it would be an insult to my Greek heritage if I wouldn't say there was the Greeks who invented hospitality. So everybody's going to be angry now all over the world that I say that. But talking about leaders, I'm not going to give you any business final words. I'm going to speak to your students. I had the pleasure, and I still have the pleasure of having a couple of interns or a few interns at Wyndham, at our Wyndham offices in Hammersmith from Bournemouth. And you guys, and I'm talking to all of your students, you guys are the leaders. We are the leaders today, but you're the leaders of tomorrow. We're going to learn how to smile behind the mask. And when the mask is out, we need to keep that smile on. You got to love people to be in this business. And that's what we all do. We love people, and people want to be loved. They don't want to stay at home and just stare at the Zoom screen for the rest of their lives. So I'm very optimistic. Bring on the curiosity, guys and girls, boys and girls, bring it on. Challenge us. You're the leaders. You're the future of hospitality. Don't be afraid. Don't be worried about the masks. Those masks will come off, and we're gonna keep on smiling, and we're gonna keep on being optimistic and keep enjoying life, because that's what people do. They love life, and we love people. That's why we're in tourism. So good luck to all of you. Go to Bournemouth. Go and learn what this beautiful industry is all about. Come and join us when the time is right and when you're ready, and just forget about those masks. They don't really exist in our industry. We smile with our eyes today, and when they're off, we're going to smile with our whole face. That's my message.
Thank you very much, sir. Bruce, all the way from US.
Sure. Well, thanks again. I appreciate it, Dimitrios, and it's really lovely to hear all the insights that you all have shared. And certainly I'm not too Pollyannish about this situation. There's a lot to be gloomy about. But I'll argue that the passion to serve is immune to and maybe even reinforced by global pandemics and other kinds of environmental shocks that we've been facing for many, many years. And there's already signs that, the industry, and I think even more boldly, humanity can grow and evolve and even thrive. So to see some of these examples, emerge, like cloud kitchens and intelligent guest room cleaning and management systems. There's a sea change in how we conceptualize and deliver on hospitality. So I think the solutions to our problems, we face will be decades in the making, and we'll have to be very creative. But I think the real key to this is our collaboration with each other across industry segments and geographic regions, so that we remain connected and can maximize opportunities to really co-create visions about where we're going to take this industry and be more prescriptive about the industry needs going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruce. And Adele, your last words.
Thank you, Dimitrios. Well, I'm most passionate about the HR side of the industry. So in this opportunity to restart tourism, in doing so, let's keep in mind the people who do the jobs, those people who actually make our industry happen, those people that make those destinations unique and different and make our experiences worthwhile. And if we're restarting tourism and thinking about the people, then let's adhere to the decent work agenda. And the Minister mentioned this at the start of this about the decent work agenda and how we can bring this in towards to a more sustainable future for our workforce. So to our lovely students listening, if you don't know what the decent work agenda is, well, you can look it up. Thank you.
That's the assignment already. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Vicky, your last words.
Thank you so much. I wanted to say to your students to continue to study tourism, because the tourism industry is wonderful and will survive for sure, and pays lots of attention to the people.
And Duncan?
I found it fascinating. I mean, clearly there's a lot of uncertainty, but there are a lot of positives that people have spoken about today. So we've seen adaptation, we've seen innovation, we've seen decency and integrity in many situations, and we've seen opportunity. So it's not all doom and gloom, COVID. In some ways, we're seeing the best of the tourism industry. There are reasons to be cheerful. There are reasons to be optimistic.
Thank you very much. That's a fantastically optimistic message. Guys, I'll finish with a namaste, because I started this morning at 6 o'clock doing 2 seminars in India. And I think this is my last seminar for the day, celebrating World Tourism Day. Namaste. Be safe, be healthy, be happy, do good, and contribute to community. I think I've heard wonderful things. I'm really grateful to all of you. I know that you're all busy. I know that 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon, it's a lot to ask, and I'm very, very grateful for your contributions. Thank you very much for.
I'll send the bill from my divorce lawyer to the university, Dimitris. Don't worry about it.
That's fine. That's not a problem.
We're used to it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much.
Good luck to all of you.
See you soon. Bye bye. Hopefully soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.
See you.
Thank you.
Bye.